Hello, welcome back, people. So here we are for another setup video. This time we are at Spain, Circuit de Catalunya, Barcelona, Circuit de blah 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 blah, whatever it is. We are at Spain. All right, so it's a medium to high downforce, mid high downforce circuit. You do not want to be running like max swings like you do in Hungary or Monaco. But it's still a relatively high downforce circuit. So you'll be running somewhere in the regions of 30 clicks on front and rear wing, plus minus, depending on the setup. So I have gone for slightly lower downforce setup for my race that I did earlier this week, just because my rival was much quicker than me on race pace and even in qualifying pace. So I knew the only chance I will have at beating him is at least putting the car on pole or alongside him on the front row, and then with the lower arrow, hopefully I can just hold him off for as long as I want. Fortunately, that did not really happen, or sort of happen, and then it unraveled with a poor strategy, Ferrari strategy coming in for my rival. But either way, the plan sort of worked out. However, you can always use this setup and just add on 3 or 4 clicks of downforce for the front wing and rear wing, and you'll have a pretty good downforce setup to use throughout the race. I will definitely recommend going for that high downforce setup because it's so much more consistent and much faster over a long race pace. Um, in terms of qualifying though, it's always touch and go with lower downforce. You can always achieve a faster lap time or similar lap time to a high downforce setup. The only difference is you might notice probably on corner exits you might lose just a tiny bit, but if it's a long flat out zone, you might just recover all that lost time. There's always pros and cons to using low and high downforce. Now I'll just go on a hot lap and I'll try to recreate the lap that I did. All right, so the best time that I had on my Delta, you'll see that's done on a high downforce and sort of a different suspension setup. And I'll be trying to do this lap with the race setup that I use. Obviously, race setups are not going to be the fastest in time trial, but nevertheless, time trial is not where you get points in your race. All right, so let's have a look at the hot lap. So hopefully you can pick up a few tips: how to take a corner, which gearing and whatnot, how much to brake, when to brake, how much to accelerate, when to accelerate, and the throttle, the steering input as well. You have to be really smooth here, otherwise if you're a little too much on the throttle while turning, car will just go around. All right, so let's see how the hot lap goes, and you can catch me back in about 2 minutes to give you a rundown of the setup. Let's see. Yes, nothing happened. Let's just try this again. Well, 17-1 flat, I think that's kind of okay for a race-ish setup. Obviously, times are not representative over here, but the lap time that I did in qualifying was a 16.2 or 3, around there. I forgot. I really forgot, but it was around 16.2, 16.3. So a real session, short qualifying, it's definitely much faster than time trial. So do not take everything in time trial for granted. Don't care about the lap time that you get here. You just want to make sure you use time trial to get a good baseline setup, a good understanding of the track, how to take each corner, how much power you can possibly apply, and all that. And most importantly, if it's gonna be drivable for you. Do you like the circuit or not? I like this track since day one. This was the first track that got me into sim racing in the first place, so I love to come back to this track, whether it's on this game or any other sim titles. Well, can't call F1 a sim title, but any real sim titles. All right, so let's go back to the garage and have a look at the setup. So I'll show you what I ran first. No, I'll just show you the time trial setup that I had. All right, a world record setup as well. I'll just run through that. So let's just take Saron Har's setup here. Good old trustable esports driver. So what's suitable in time trial will not be suitable in the race most of the time. You just need minor tweaks here and there to make it more drivable. 36, 32 is what's the time trial setup is. It's definitely high downforce. You are vulnerable on the straights in a race. Compared to what I ran, that's about almost a tenth quick on the straights, about 5 to 6 kph quick on the straights. So without DRS, you can pretty easily defend. You regen about 10% ERS a lap, so that's a lot. 2 laps, 3 laps, you recharge, and then someone tries to attack you, you can defend. But that's the thing. If you run low downforce, your whole gameplay is going to be defense. If you run high downforce, then you're on the attack, but you're gonna have to time your attack and pull away at the right time. Setup, so 36, 32 wings, pretty good downforce level actually, no question about that. 55 on throttle, again this is pretty much standard throughout the game. Any track you run 55 or 60, you're fine. Generally you want to run it 55 for higher speed cornerings. So say Spain, there's a lot of high speed corners, you want to run 55. 60 is also useful if there are some slow corners. So in sector 3 you could run 60 just to give you that extra kick out of the corner. Slower tracks perhaps like Bahrain and whatnot, Monza, you definitely want to run 60, 65 even, so that you get better traction out of the slow corners. Whereas if you have long corners and all, like Spain turn 3, it's like never ending, and 55 is good. 50 is too low. If you go too low, you will induce even more wheel spin on the rear. So sometimes the balance will lie somewhere around 55 to 60. Keep it that way, you'll be fine in the race. Off throttle, this is quite important as well. 50 is what you want to run pretty much everywhere, every track. Again, you can run 51 or 52 to keep the race a bit more stable, a bit less sliding as you go higher. You do not want to go any higher than say 52, I'll say, because there was again another exploit in the last game in F1 2021 where if you had ABS on and you ran 50% off throttle, you're pretty much quicker in cornering. So again, what they've done this year is 50% this year is kind of like running 55 or 56 in actuality. So just run 50%, you'll be good. In qualifying, it's also okay. Maybe you want to run 51, maybe on the second or third run if you feel the car is a little bit unstable on the rear, especially when you're going through corners, and high speed as well. So it will keep the car a little bit, it starts to hurt with all these things. It will get a little more stable in high speed when you raise your off throttle. So which is good to give you the confidence that you need to push. So 50 always okay, 51 also okay, 52 also okay. The higher you go, the more understeer you're gonna get though. So use this cautiously because you cannot change this once you're already on the track. You can change this only between sessions, let's say between qualifying and between race, and also while you go for different runs in qualifying. Suspension geometry again is the same for all tracks. Keep it like this. There's no questions about it because this is going to give you the best stability and also it's somehow quicker. I mean, not say somehow, but you know, technically this is a faster way to take the straights. Less camber and less toe will give you better straight line speed, not by much. This you barely even notice about tenths, you know, maybe not even tenths. It's only about maybe on Monza straight you'll only gain 0.02 or 0.3 at most. That's the only thing, but it's very nice to drive with. So keep it like this. Suspension in the world record setup 6-1, 5-1. Rears, you always want to keep it at 1 because that's going to keep the rears soft, give you better acceleration out of corners. There are some cases where you can run maybe slightly higher suspension, maybe 2, and maybe even a rear roll bar like the one that I did for my best lap. The reason is very simple. When you go lower on the rear right height, it generates more downforce, but at the same time it's going to make the car a little more unstable. So sometimes adding a bit of suspension stops the rear of your car from stalling out and losing downforce. But either way, to keep it simple, run it 1-1, you're pretty much safe throughout the entire of this game. Front suspension and anti-roll bar, I like to start at 6-1, 6-1 anyway, so that's a good baseline to start off. So world record setup uses this. I'll explain why I run certain things in a while. 7-4 right height again. Front right height, when you increase it, it's going to generate a bit of understeer, but if setup is already oversteery, this is going to reduce that oversteer and also increase your straight line speed. The higher you go on your front right height, increases your straight line speed. You go lower, it reduces your straight line speed, but it increases the pointiness of your car. Rear right height, if you reduce it, it's going to increase your top speed, but it's also going to make your car a little more unstable in high speed when you put on the power. You have to be a bit more progressive with it, even if you want to be aggressive. So if you go higher, it's of course easier to stamp the throttle in high speed, but you're going to be losing a lot of time on the straights, and also the car will feel a little bit more floaty in corners because your car is not planted to the ground. You're not generating as much downforce from the diffuser. Okay, so brakes 150 again, keep it like this. 51 maybe if your rear tires are wearing out too much, that's always okay. Tire pressures, time trial, bullshit tire pressures. So always min on the fronts, max on the rears. It's pretty much good for time trial, but the reason is because, you know, when you reduce your front pressures, it gives you more turning, more grip on the front tires. When you increase your rear pressures, it gives you more stability on the rears. But this will not work in a race situation because tire temperatures will come into play. You want to run maybe as close to minimum tire temperatures. Alright, 2 more setups. Let's run through what I actually had for my best lap. And it's a bit wonky, but it worked in time trial. It did not really work in a race practice, but here it is anyway. It's a variation of the world record setup. It started off with 39, 32 wings, but I dropped it to this, so you can use this. 55, 52. Again, there's not much variation. It's just personal preference to get the car to feel the way you want. No change in geometry. Suspension. Why I use 11-1, 11-2, 11-2? Well, when you have maximum stiffness on the front and minimum softness or minimum stiffness, stiff front and soft rear equals to Stability Pro Max Plus. That's the recipe of the game basically, and in general that's a recipe of suspension. But again, it was an experiment. When you increase your front suspension, it gives you a bit more stability in the car to power out of the corners much quicker, a bit more confidence to put down the power, so you can use this to advantage. I reduced the front right height because, you know, this is quite stiff, so I reduced the front right height to make the car a bit more pointy. You can also use this. And then tire pressures, only 3 clicks on the rear, not much of a difference. Right, this was originally my race setup. In the practice race it worked well, but I needed a bit more straight line speed and whatnot. So again, I went with this setup as my final setup. So this is the low downforce variation. If you want high downforce, just increase 1 click up and down, up front and rear together. So you may arrive to something similar like this, 38, 32. It's not much different compared to a world record setup anyway, right? So 34 on the front, 28 on the rear. Front you can adjust accordingly. If the car starts to get a bit too pointy, a bit oversteery as your first thing goes on. Coming into the pits, when you take on new tires, reduce the downforce by 1 or 2 clicks. You will be perfectly fine. Transmission 55 and 51 on the rear. Again, just a personal preference depending on the setup. Geometry, no changes. Suspension, again, here's where I kind of got a little happy with the experimentation. 11.3 ride height worked really well, so maximum straight line speed on the front, but it was somehow understeery on the front, so my recommendation will be to drop this down to 9 or 10 and you will get a bit of a pointier car, and that should give you pretty much the same straight line speed as running 11 front ride height. Rear ride height though, 3 is a bit sketchy. If you're not smooth enough on the throttle, you can practice it until you're good enough with it, or you can just go with 4. It's pretty safe. 5 is even safer, but again, the higher you go on the rear, the more unstable it's going to become in slow speed. You will not really get the feeling that the car is planted in low speed. I mean, the game is already broken with the physics anyway, so it's not going to make any much difference. Right, front suspension, I ran 11 because it gives you a lot of stability in high speed, but in hindsight, I should have reduced this to like 8 or 9 because this was a little too understeery in the race. I like the roll bar, the front roll bar at 11 because mid corner, while you are turning, coasting, this keeps the car stable. It does not send the car into a spin. Front suspension, well, the golden rule is if you have entry understeer, you want to reduce your front suspension. If you have entry oversteer, then you can increase the front suspension. So use this knowledge to your advantage and adjust this accordingly. Keep the rears at 1, that should be fine. And then anti-roll bar, generally they work more like in the mid cornering ish phase, or while you're cornering, you feel it, the difference a bit more. And especially if you want to start powering out of a corner as well, you can feel that the front anti-roll bar will make a difference. If you go softer on the front anti-roll bar, it's gonna make your car a little more wobbly on the front if you put down the power. But if you don't feel that, that's good. All right, because when you go softer on the front anti-roll bar as well, it will help with your turn in and also the mid corner. You can turn much quicker, turn much more into a corner, carry more speed into a corner. But if you go too low, your car will be very unstable in high speed. Somewhere like Spain, I just ran 11. It was just nice. Again, you can experiment with this. Maybe just start with 9.1, 11.1, and 9.3, 9.4. Let's just start with this. Brakes 150 again, same thing. Tire pressures, interestingly, I actually ran 2 clicks for the qualifying because soft tires do overheat a lot. But for the race, it was fully overcast. That means all clouds, no sun at all for first half of the race, and then it was raining at the end. So I ran 1 click on the front and 4 clicks of pressure on the rear. 1, 2, 3, 4. Reason is it gave a bit more temperature in the tires, kept them around 95 degrees Celsius in the dry session. And then when the rain started, you know, at some point the tires are going to cool off naturally. Having higher pressure will make sure you have extra temperature, so you might be quicker than other people when it's a transition period. And when the intermediate period arrives, you know, your tires will last slightly longer with higher pressures. Lower pressure gives you better grip, higher pressure gives you more tire management, basically less tire wear. All right, so there you go. 2 clicks will be pretty good for qualifying. I'd say at least 2 clicks because if you go minimum, it gets a bit wobbly on the rear. So there you go. This is the entire setup. 34-28, bang on. If you want high downforce, I would definitely recommend going for a high downforce setup first in your practice. So start off maybe, let's say 32 and 38, or maybe in 37 on the front, whichever you like it. All right, and then start going down slowly, 1 click at a time until you find a perfect balance. Remember, lower downforce can be equally quick as high downforce for 1 lap pace for qualifying, but in the race pace, you're always going to be slower. All right, and you're going to have higher tire wear. Spain is not an issue on tire wear, so again, if you're better on that, you may use a lower downforce setup to your advantage. Transmission 55, 51, no great. I actually ran 60 while I was in the race session because it somewhat felt better while following, and also, you know, going on power, it didn't really feel like the car was going to snap on me. So again, you can adjust this through your MFD if you need. Geometry keep it the same, no question. Suspension, start off like this, you'll be good. And if you have understeer, you can even increase your front wing, or you can start reducing the front suspension a little bit. I'll say don't go any lower than 6. If you have reached a point where you're already at 6 and the car is still understeery, you might as well just increase the front wing. You will not lose any time. If anything, you will gain more time in the race because you are able to hit the corners much more perfectly. All right, so there you go. And then brakes, 150 all the way. 51 is always useful in a race situation, especially if you're following someone, you want to brake earlier, or you just want to save the rear tires a little bit more. You don't want to wear out the race too much. This will be helpful. And tire pressures, 2 clicks on the rear, 0 on the front. This is okay for qualifying. For a fully hot race, if it's all sun, if you see that, and a combination of cloudy weather, right, cloud and sun, you want to run slightly lower pressures like this. 0 and 2 will work just nicely for those conditions. If you have raining conditions or fully overcast, at least 1 click on the front will help you keep some temperature in the tires and give you optimal grip. 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 will work well. 5 I don't really recommend because the tires will start to get a little hot. So there you go. Hope we have a good tryout with this setup, and we'll see you the next one, which is gonna be it's gonna be Azerbaijan, Baku. Oh, somehow it's nice to drive this year, so I'll be back maybe in a few minutes to record that, and you will not notice it because it's gonna go up a few days later. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever it is, and then check out some other videos that are in the channel. There's some more playlists, F122 playlists, all F122 setups, and at the end you can just see some recommended videos or whatever there is you want to watch, or you just click on my channel, just watch whatever you want. ACC stuff is there as well, and funny things happen here and there. You can always watch it on the channel. So take care, stay safe, bye bye.